We got a sentencing date for Lori Daybell, we have appeals because of the jury for Lori Daybell, and we have some of those same juror members speaking out in more interviews, and we're going to talk about the highlights of it all in today's video. Hello everybody and welcome back to the sofa, which is right behind me with Roscoe, and my name is Paul. Now, like I said in my little intro, we're going to be covering a few different things today. First of all, we will be covering, she's filed for a new trial because of the jury. Our juror members, some things with that. We're going to talk about that. Very quickly go over the sentencing date and what we can expect from that. We're also going to look at some video clips of the jurors and what they've been saying. I did another video with different interviews that they did, but they've spoken to other outlets and whatnot. So I just want to talk about a few of the key points from that. So the way this will work is we'll first cover a couple of articles and then we'll move to the video clips after that. So let's go ahead and dive on in. Okay, so the first thing that we have here, Lori Vallow Daybell files for a new trial citing confusing jury instructions. This is by Alexandra Duggan, and we're just going to review a few of the highlights with this. Now, right here in the same headline, it says the defense says a media interview showed the jurors in the case were confused about demonstrative evidence versus character evidence. So let's see what they're talking about. So now you can pause to read this or go along with me, and I'll kind of sum it up here. But the article says that on May 25th, the defense attorneys filed a motion in Fremont County asking for a new trial. It says in the motion that Archibald and Thomas cite an interview that East Idaho News conducted with a juror in the cases after the verdict. They said that this interview makes it clear the jurors were confused about the demonstrative evidence versus character evidence in the shooting of Charles Vallow. That's Lori Vallow's ex-husband. Now it says that Arizona evidence was only admitted to the jury in order to show prior behavior and cannot be used to make a decision on the Idaho charges. And it goes on to say that the juror tells reporter Nate Eaton in the interview, "We didn't consider this during our deliberations because it was clear to us the instructions were clear. Arizona evidence and testimony is only for demonstrative purposes." Now, hold on. I hope I'm saying the demonstrative word right because I keep saying it that way, but it's what it looks like to me, okay? Y'all know I'm nothing fancy up in here. Now, it does go to clarify this that demonstrative evidence consists of summaries of evidence provided by law enforcement, which the defense says the evidence shown on behalf of Charles Vallow's death was not. It also says the defense previously objected to the evidence from Arizona being admitted in the trial, but it was denied by Fremont County District Judge Stephen Boyce. And then to quote this, it says, "To confuse demonstrative evidence and character evidence is easy to do, hence the defense objections should have been sustained," the motion says. In the interview, the juror tells Eaton that he thought Arizona police may have dropped the ball in the Charles Vallow death investigation. The defense writes that Eaton refers to body camera footage of Charles Vallow talking to police before he was shot and killed by Alex Cox, Lori Vallow's brother. And the juror nods in agreement. The problem with this, says the defense, is that Charles Vallow's statement to law enforcement were not part of the evidence presented in the Idaho case. Now, to go even further, it says, "We can only conclude that the juror relied on information not presented in court to reach his conclusion that Arizona dropped the ball," the defense wrote. However, it's unclear if the juror watched the body camera footage of Charles Vallow, as seen in the Netflix documentary Sins of Our Mother, after the trial. And to go a little bit further, other reasons for a new trial motion include a clerical error in the indictment, which originally had the Idaho Code listed under the charge of grand theft to present as with intent to deprive, not with intent to deceive, like the prosecution intended. The judge allowed this error to be fixed, but the defense says that the indictment should not have been amended by the government. Okay, so let's talk about all that for a minute. Now, here's the thing with this, and again, let's just go ahead and say it. I always do, but if people are new here, then you gotta know. I ain't no lawyer. I ain't no doctor. I ain't none of that fancy stuff. I'm just a guy with a sofa, and currently dogs barking in the background. I do apologize. It is a zoo here this weekend. So that being said, these are just literally my opinions. This is for entertainment reasons only. I urge you to do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and feel free to talk about it down below in the comment section. So me reading this, I'm like, like, ain't nothing to see here, folks. This is just par for the course, right? This is what happens with every case. Of course, they're going to appeal it. The only thing that I come back to with this is I'm just like, but I thought we were celestial beings above all of this type stuff. So why waste time doing this, you know? So that's a whole other subject, right? So this whole thing about whether the juror say this, a juror did this, and did they watch it before or after? This is just something made available that gives the prosecution a reason to do this. I don't fault the juror for this. They would find anything to do this with, right? Now the clerical error, again, that's grasping at straws as far as I'm concerned. But again, whether we like it or not, this is what the defense's job is to pick every little minute detail apart. And let's be honest, okay, they didn't have much to go on, right? So for them to use this as like a reason, I'm like, hey, they got to try something. Now let's go ahead and move on over to the sentencing date, and this article is by Nate Eaton, EastIdahoNews.com. The article title is Sentencing Date Set for Lori Vallow Daybell. Now this is just very quick here, but it says that Stephen Boyce, he's going to sentence Daybell at 9 a.m. on Monday, July 31st, Fremont County Courthouse. Victims are expected to give impact statements, and Daybell may be allowed to speak if she wishes. Public seating is first come, first served, and video recording and taking photos inside the courthouse will be prohibited according to a court order. The court will live stream the hearing, and EastIdahoNews.com will broadcast the video across our platforms. Okay, well, thank God for that, right? That we can see this play out. I am so excited and grateful to hear the victims, survivors in this case be able to get up and have their say. I'm talking about everyone, the family members, Larry, Kate, Cresha, anyone who wants to get up there and have their say in this. Cannot wait for that, right? Now, we can all sit here and, of course, speculate at this point how will Lori react. I'm calling it now. I think she's going to have the same thing. We're going to get nothing from her, right? If we got nothing from her already, why would she even think to give any of these people any amount of her attention or anything, right? If anything, this is going to be even more of a way for her to be like, I'm not going to show any emotion. I don't want them to know that they won, because in my mind, I think that that is how she thinks. So we're going to stand by for that. I'm going to be watching it. Hopefully I won't have to work that day, but we'll definitely talk about it. I'll make some videos on it. And then this chapter in this case will be closed and move on to the next, because there's so many other cases or trials to be had in this, right? So we'll see what takes place. Now, let's move on to a couple of those juror interviews, and it's not a bunch of clips that I have, but just a few, so let's dive into those real quick. Now, this is Tiffany. She did another interview, which I did a video on that as well. This is just another one. I want to just take a couple of the clips and listen to them, because I felt like it was some more digging in deeper to some previous information she said, as well as just her thoughts and feelings on this in general.
What was the hardest part for you personally?
I think just being a mom, and not being able to understand how anybody could, do that to their own children. It was so hard for me.
This is the second time that I've watched an interview with her, and she gets a little choked up, and understandably, right? I love her thought process. I love how she relays information. I think she's an excellent juror. And so hearing this, I'm like, yeah, this is what so many of us wanted to know. So many of us were so shocked by, so angered by, and I'll say it again, shocked by, how could anyone do this to their own children? And we'll probably never know.
One of the questions they asked us, in our questionnaire while in the selection process was, you're going to be shown autopsy photos. Is this something that you think that you could, be okay with? And I checked, yeah, sure. I think so. But it was, it wasn't. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. But I know that I needed to do it, to be able to bring justice to those kids, because, they didn't have a say in it.
I love that she said that about, I knew I needed to do it to bring justice. They didn't have a say. And again, I can't fathom having to look at those pictures. And so I salute these juror members, who were willing to go through with this and look at this very, very difficult evidence. And again, I can only surmise in my mind what some of those pictures looked like. And even just the thought of it is so heartbreaking because, again, like she said earlier, not only is it this graphic, shocking images, right? But right behind that, you're like, these are kids. This woman's kids who's sitting across from me, I'm pretending to be a juror right now. This woman's kids who's either smirking or not acting like she cares. I don't care what kind of a defense you have. I don't care what excuse you have. Nothing can get you past that. And to see the actual imagery of it, I mean, I shudder to think what I would be like after that.
I just feel like I had more emotion than she did, and the only time I saw her have emotion was when she saw a picture of JJ. She, kissed her lips and it just went like that. It just felt like so not sincere to me.
Amen, sister. This is another thing that many of us have been saying, like perfect strangers, right? We have more emotion over this than Lori does, right? People who have never, that we're not related, we don't know them, but it's like this level of empathy that we have towards situations like this. And that's one thing we've not seen from Lori at all. Now, also interesting for her to say the whole thing about, Lori kissing her lips to the picture of JJ or whatever, the screen, and it didn't seem sincere. I mean, again, at this point with Lori, you almost have to assume that everything is for show, everything is for a reason. I'm surprised she even did that.
How does that make you feel to kind of watch her and see this lack of emotion?
Inhuman? That's what I feel like. The rest of us are crying, emotions, nothing. It just almost seemed like she was inhuman.
I mean, perfect word. And that's the thing, like she said, I mean, that the jurors and people like this, you're in this courtroom with, again, Larry K, survivors, family members, these kind of people. Emotions are high. The jury seeing this, they're probably upset, but then you just have Lori over there talking about it's all going to work itself out in the wash, and you're like, what are you talking about? I'm so thankful that translated to the jury because that was the shocking part of this. Just the wedding pictures alone. To piece it all together after the fact and to be like, well, wait a minute, they're dancing and having this great time, full well knowing where those children are and that literally like all these agencies are after them. I mean, who could even do that to begin with, but then be that nonchalant about it after the fact?
Now that it's over, I mean, have you looked up at the media or any of this stuff like to kind of fill in the holes?
I have. I felt like there was a lot of holes, mainly like what happened to Alex Cox. Like we never knew. I didn't know what happened to him. Like where's he at? Melanie Boudreau, where's she at?
Oh yeah, she's speaking for a lot of us. What happened with Alex? This is the $1 million question. Melanie Boudreau, tons of questions surrounding that. The fact that she wasn't charged and was able to get out of testifying will always shock me, right? Will never not shock me. Now, do I have any merit for that? Any, factual basis? No, just from what I've watched from the sofa, so that's my opinion. So just know that. But yeah, my personal opinion on that is I'm very surprised. And interesting to hear, the jurors saw this too. We're like, what happened with this person? And what happened with this person? I mean, lots of holes that sadly I don't think will ever get filled.
After hearing about the deliberations, I really feel that it's not that I didn't miss out on anything, but I just feel like they voted, or not voted, but they found her guilty of the charges that I would have.
Amen, sister. And we appreciate your service, Tiffany, for getting up there. Even if you didn't, you had to be an alternate at the end or whatever it was called. Again, I love how she interpreted the trial, how she dissected the information, and the way that she discussed it. If I had to go up for something like this, honestly, I would want this woman on my jury. Whether the outcome is what you want it to be, right? I mean, she was very level-headed, and it's so refreshing to see that. Now, let's switch gears and move over to another juror who sat down with another interviewer, Good Morning America, and let's just see what he had to say there.
Saul revealing he was the lone holdout on one of the murder charges. You were one of the people who said that no, that The prosecution has not provided the evidence for us to convict her.
I just didn't feel like at that timeline with Tylee, we were quite there yet. And if we were, I perhaps was missing it.
Now, again, there was charges in here that I was like, oh, okay, I'm surprised here, right? So for him to come up and be like, oh, he was the one person holding out, again, they're doing their due diligence, right? And at least he's like, well, wait, let's explain this a little bit more. How does this work? Obviously, they all came to the same conclusion eventually, right? But the fact that, he's up here saying, yeah, look, you know what? I needed a little bit more information on this specific thing here. I mean, great. I think that's how the system should work. Question things and really hold it up to a high bar so that when we do get a conviction, especially in things like this, it's not just well, whatever, type thing. And that can go both ways. I mean, this is how we end up with innocent people behind bars. And not to say that for 1 minute I think that Lori could possibly be innocent, because I do not think that way at all.
Did you think that Lori really believed that she is this apostle in this apocalyptic doomsday cult?
Yes, I think she started with maybe curiosity, exploring what her initial beliefs were. And once Chad came into the picture, and she went along with it.
I love that they ask these type questions, because it's something that's been on my mind too, and always will be, because at the end of the day, we'll never know. We'll never know what went through her mind. Thank God. But you know what I'm saying? Like, we'll never really get there, because I don't think we can trust anything she has to say. And then number two, I mean, it's, I just don't think that she's, that balanced. So hearing what I've heard him say, other jurors and whatnot, about these belief systems, and I tend to agree with this. I do think there's to a certain degree that they believe this, specifically Lori. Now, also, I think some of the people, her underlings, like Alex Cox and people like this, they had a much easier time to convince of this. But I also think that Lori was not completely stupid, right? I think she knew at times what she was doing and how to manipulate and all of that. And at some point probably went gung-ho with this whole belief. It was probably just such a wonderful, like, narcissistic feeding trough for her. That it was like, oh my God, let's lap this stuff up.
You saw his testimony, those pictures of Chad and Lori on the beach in Hawaii when her kids were buried in his backyard.
I was disgusted. I didn't want to look at them. I just couldn't believe how someone can be that happy when your kids are on the ground. And the person that was key in all of this is sitting across from you, smiling at you and dancing with you on the beach.
Again, we've all been wondering it. How can you sit there? How could you ever put your head down again and sleep a full night's sleep? Let alone be on a beach in Hawaii playing a damn ukulele, laughing and giggling with your children buried in his backyard. I will never understand that part. I will never understand it in a million years. And, honestly, I hope I don't. I think that's for a reason, right? I don't think it's meant to be understood. I think it's meant to be shocking and meant to be horrifying, because that's what it is.
As the evidence came to light, testimony was shared, it was harder to look at her. And, growing up, you talk about good and bad, God and evil. And I think for the first time in my life, I put a face to evil.
Now, he said this in another interview that he did, the same type thing of, I think, I saw evil for the first time, and I'm going to agree with him. I mean, that the last image of her is just haunting, right? And to sit there, and like he said, it got to the point where I didn't want to look at her and whatnot. I mean, if you think back over these years where we followed this and like the emotions, and I know for me, and I've spoken this way about Lori and Letitia, because they each conjure up surprisingly different feelings, but in the same room, if that makes sense, different levels of intensity. And I think because they each disgust me on some level to such a degree, and at times it's like, with Letitia, I mean, there's both this question with both of them of why, how horrible is this, and that type thing. With Lori, there's this component of why would you invite or get involved with this person that y'all thought these crazy beliefs and trying to turn your whole family into this and take everyone out and your children and the whole 9 yards. Whereas Letitia, it's more of like this, again, I just think without very little influence from others, pure evil, pure evil. And to do the same thing, this horrible thing she did to Gannon. So again, with this specific case with Lori, I can't wait to get to sentencing day to hear everyone have their say and to get up there. And I hope she feels small. I hope she feels terrible. That is something that I have wanted throughout this whole thing, was to get this sense of knowing that she felt bad, because she doesn't act like that, right? This is no big deal to her, it seems. And I don't know if we'll ever get that reaction out of her, that I'm like, Paul, I don't think she's ever going to act that way. Maybe in 20 years she might come up with something, but my first gut reaction would be she's ready to get out of prison. I wouldn't think she was sorry, but who knows, maybe I could be wrong. And again, I feel like if in 20 years she acts like, oh my God, what have I done? Granted, too late. Children are no longer here, Tammy's no longer here, Charles no longer here, but at least she might have that realization. That does not mean that I ever think she should see the light of day. Absolutely not. I think she needs to be prosecuted to the fullest in every single case, as well as Chad, and that neither of them ever need to see the light of day, because they're clearly incredibly dangerous people, and to quote the juror, pure evil. Now, if you're still watching, I do appreciate it. Drop some sofas down below and show some love to the victims in the case. And until we gather around these monsters that we talk about again, well, I'll see y'all there.